woman can also be enlightened. There is no, barricade to enlighten woman. Everyone can be enlightened. Everyone has got his life. But ordinarily, the Shudra and the Vaishyas, they are not to be considered very intelligent. Janmana jayati Shudra. Everyone is born Shudra. Sanskarat bhavet dija. By sanskar, just like we follow, not all of a sudden we accept anyone as Brahman. We give sanskar, chanting, first of all association. Satang prasangad mama bija sangvida. By good association, by the association of devotees, one can understand automatically what is God, what is Krishna. Let him sit properly. So, sanskar, although the Sudras are not given any sanskar, it is very difficult for them to accept sanskar, reformative method. But this Krishna consciousness movement, under the direction of Goswamis and Pancharatra system, they are giving the opportunity everyone to become a Brahmin. Because without becoming Brahmin, nobody can understand what is Krishna, what is Krishna consciousness. One must be on the platform of goodness. When one is fixed up on the platform of goodness, the other two qualities, namely ignorance and passion, cannot disturb him. Nityang bhagavata sevaya nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityang bhagavata sevaya sinnatang sakatha krishna punna savana kirtana ridyantasthya abhadrani vidhunati suhitsatam. Ridyantasthya, Krishna is within your heart. If you kindly continue to hear about him as you are doing, then Krishna will be very much pleased. Or this person is now interested in me. Because nobody is interested in Krishna. So Krishna is also silent to them. But as soon as you become interested, or Krishna becomes very active, or he is trying to do something, I shall help him. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Tisham satadujuktanam, Tisham nityavijuktanam. What is that verse? Tisham satajuktanam bhajatang priti purvakam buddhijogam dadamitam. Krishna says. He is silent for the non-devotees, but he speaks to the devotees. That is very natural. If some big man, he talks with men who are intelligent, with business life. Why he waste his time talking with some rascals and fools? So Krishna talks, but talks to the devotee. Who are devotee? Satadajuktanang bhajatang priti purvakam. Those are 24 hours engaged in rendering loving devotional service to the Lord. To such person, Krishna gives intelligence. not others. So, this process of hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, must be continued. That is our life. Savanam Kirtanam Vishnu. Savanam means hearing. Kirtanam means chanting about Lord Vishnu, not for others. Now I am hearing and chanting about Nixon. That will not help. Because everyone is busy, and newspaper, what Nixon said, what he is doing. Everywhere. The politicians, they have made the minds of general people, general public, that they are very much interested in what the politician says. Every day he sees that he is simply speaking all nonsense. Still, he is interested. Puna puna char vitachar banana. They are called chewing the chewed again and again. Matinna Krishne paratu satoba mitho vipaddita grihabhritana. Nati vidu sartha gating hi Vishnu durasayadi bahirarthamanina andha jathandhai rupaniyamana stepi satantra urudam nibadhya. Isatantra, by the laws of material nature, one who is bound up, tight, hands and legs, we are all. We cannot
So when he said that to Prabhupada, Prabhupada started to laugh, and he said, well, this is the way to say yes when in fact you want to say no. And as it's impossible to talk to a big crowd of people without a microphone, they were not here. In the London temple, the deities were carved by Shamsundar, and here also the Jagannath deities have been carved by the devotees themselves. So it was a French devotee who was a sculptor, who was called Dayamriga, who carved them, and then I painted them. And there is two particularities on Subhadra here. That first, she's smaller. She should be a little bit bigger. And the reason is that when Dayamriga wanted to carve her, he forgot that he needed to have the little top knot on her head. And then when he realized he had to do that, then he had to make her shorter in order to be able to carve the top knot on her head. So that's why she's kind of smaller. She also has different eyes than most of the Jagannath deities. And the reason was that I painted them according to a picture that I got from India, but I didn't like the look of the eyes of Subhadra. So I just changed the eyes and I made them lotus-shaped eyes, which no Subhadra deity ever had in any deities from India. But everybody found it very, very beautiful, and Prabhupada found them very beautiful, though very unusual eyes for Subhadra.
Later during that visit to London, before Bhagavan and I went on to Paris, Srila Prabhupada called us into his room and to give us some more instructions and inspiration. And I was very much hoping at that time to receive a personal instruction from Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada gave many general instructions, but of course a disciple always hankers to have some personal interrelationship with his spiritual master and receive some special instructions. So I was a little shy to ask, but at one point I spoke up and I said, Srila Prabhupada, could you give me some instruction? So Srila Prabhupada leaned over the desk at that time and looked at me in my eyes. He said, preach boldly and have faith in the holy names. I've always tried to follow that instruction of Srila Prabhupada as a guideline for the rest of my life. I was so nervous at the time, I don't remember how I felt. I just felt blessed that Prabhupada would see me, notice me, and give some instruction that I could build the rest of my devotional career upon. And then Prabhupada, to further encourage both of us, he reached over into his drawer and he gave me one of his dhotis, and he gave Bhagavan Das one of his undershirts. And he just smiled, and then after a little more conversation, we left for our service in Paris, France. I did wear that dhoti, actually. It was bright saffron. Of course, I was a grihastra at that time, but it was the tadiya, it was the paraphernalia of the spiritual master, and therefore divine. We know that Mahaprabhu himself, in order to encourage his own followers, his own disciples, he would sometimes give them pieces of cloth. A piece of his cloth was sent to Maharaj Bhattaparudra, who worshipped as non-different than the Lord. A piece of his cloth was sent to Gopal Bhatta Goswami in Vrindavan. So this tadiya, this nectar, this mercy of my spiritual master, I took that very seriously. I used to wear that as a chadar, actually. And sometimes when the sannyasis would come through, they would chide me, "You're grihastra and you're wearing saffron?" I said, "Yes, this is no ordinary cloth. This is the dhoti of our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. I'm not taking it off for anything."
Those of us who came into France as devotees from outside the country quickly learned that French culture was a highly intellectual culture. I think a young person in France in those days, by the age of 13 or 14, probably knew more about history and politics than a college graduate in America. And one thing that we went out of our way to do was arrange as often as possible for Srila Prabhupada to meet with intellectuals and thought leaders of the day. So he met with college professors, and he met with Cardinal Danielou, and he met with leaders from the World Health Organization. He met with leading Sanskritists. And the meetings were important because it gave us an opportunity to see how does a pure devotee of the Lord speak to different levels of people. And I think what was most astonishing was Srila Prabhupada's ability to listen carefully to each person's particular level of spiritual development and address them on that level. As they approached him, Srila Prabhupada would reciprocate, sometimes becoming very, very firm, very outspoken. Why do you speak this philosophy? Don't you understand the dangers here? He was concerned not out of any kind of pride or a sense of superiority, but because this was dangerous. These philosophies are leading people astray. Atmahana, killers of the soul.
One of the leading figures in the Rosicrucian movement in Paris came to see Prabhupada, and he was quite naive because Prabhupada kept saying, so what is that? And what does that mean? As if Prabhupada had no idea about anything. It was sort of a technique that he was employing. And me and Yogeshwar, we started to get the giggles. And we're sitting behind the man. Because whatever the man said, Prabhupada would say, why? Anyway, after leading this person on and on and on, finally Prabhupada said, so what is the ultimate? He said it's indescribable. Then Prabhupada said, that means you don't know. But still the man never became, put off by Prabhupada. He thought that Prabhupada was really, wanted to learn about the Rosicrucians. It was really very funny. Anyway, and another point that Prabhupada said, so what is the highest thing? He said, well, it's a flame. Prabhupada said, a flame? Yes. Prabhupada said, why a flame? Why not a person? But like I said, the man never caught on that Prabhupada was, just pulling him along into this endless forest of foolishness.
One of those that we invited was a psychiatrist. And the reason we invited him is because he was Christian, but in his care of his patients, he was using religion, talking a lot about Christianity. So we thought that would be very interesting to have him meet Prabhupada. So we invited him to come. I went to meet him, to bring him to Prabhupada. And the first thing he said was, where's the patient? So we said, well, there's no patient. We invited you to come and meet our spiritual master. I said, but I came to see a patient. Where's the patient? And when he saw there was no patient, he didn't want to come and he just left. So I was kind of embarrassed, and I went back and explained to Prabhupada that he didn't want to come out because he thought he was coming to take care of some sick person. And so Prabhupada just laughed and he said he didn't realize he was the patient and we were going to cure him.
When Prabhupada arrived at the airport in Paris, of course there were a lot of devotees there with flower garlands and so many things. And at the same time, the Indian ambassador to France arrived. It so happens that the French government did not send a proper welcome party for the ambassador. And one of the ladies that was supposed to do something ad hoc for the French government saw devotees. And she thought very quickly, well, we didn't prepare anything, but they look like they're prepared. So she came up and begged the devotees if they would help out, receive the ambassador. And the devotees said yes. Because we already had garlands, we were dressed, we were doing kirtan. So a group of devotees accompanied a few French officials that came and welcomed the Indian ambassador to France and garlanded him and said Hare Krishna. And the French officials that were there, especially one lady, so appreciated that the devotees came at the last minute and really gave a welcome by which the ambassador felt very pleased and honored that she offered to help us out. And the devotees very astutely said, well, our spiritual master has just come. Is there any way you could honor him? And she said, I will do what I can. And she arranged that Prabhupada be honored officially by the city of Paris and by one of the French city officials.
So when we received that letter saying that Prabhupada could be greeted officially at the Paris City Hall, the letter was saying how it would be the vice president of the Paris City Council that would be receiving Prabhupada, which is an equivalent of what a mayor will be in America. So that was very, very important personality. In this greeting speech, he was explaining how Paris had always been conscious of the spiritual values. So Paris was very happy to receive someone who is an ambassador of Indian spirituality. And then because Yogeshwar in his letter that explained a little bit of who Prabhupada was, so Mr. Aswad, the mayor, gave some praises of Prabhupada's achievement, saying how it was wonderful that at this age of 70 years old he came to France and started this spiritual movement. So a lot of very, very nice words of appreciation of Prabhupada.
This woman here is the official reception director for VIPs coming to Paris. In fact, she was the woman who arranged for Srila Prabhupada's reception at the Paris City Hall. And the protocol was made very clear to us that when we go into the reception room, everyone should stand and the mayor will give his opening remarks and then Srila Prabhupada can reply. The way it worked out was somewhat different. The mayor waited and Prabhupada sat. And the mayor started getting nervous and Prabhupada sat. And then everyone was looking at Srila Prabhupada. And I leaned over and said, Srila Prabhupada, they're waiting for you to stand. Srila Prabhupada looked at me and said, I'm supposed to stand for who? And refused to stand. So the mayor started his remarks and gave his greeting to Srila Prabhupada, seated, probably the first time in the history of the country that anyone had been received in City Hall without standing up. And then when the mayor was finished saying how Paris has always been such a spiritual city, Srila Prabhupada stood at that moment and said, Mr. Mayor, you've spoken very nicely about how France is such a spiritual country, etc. Let us examine what is spiritual. And went right for the jugular.